Hi, hola, and welcome to Piv Out with Rocio, the podcast. A podcast about the juxtaposition between emotional and mental stability during your season of Piv outing. I am so thankful you're here. I am excited to connect. Make sure you have your pen and paper, iPad, notes, however you want to jot things down, because here we're going to school. Hello, hi, and welcome to the Piv Out podcast with me, Rocio. I am so excited to have you here. I have been doing a podcast with a co-host, shout out to Diana, for going on about a year and a half, and we have such a great time on that podcast. It is called Things Mommy Never Told Me, and it was a podcast that was born from conversations Diana and I had about issues and topics that we really felt we would have loved our moms to discuss with us. So we talk about sex, the first time having sex, your period, friendships, when to leave a relationship, how to deal with men, how to deal with women. So all that being said, this is a very new platform for me. So on the Piv Out, we are going to be having conversations about the emotional and mental states that we go through in life in those seasons of pivot. So I know Piv Out is not a word. I will be copywriting that, but pivot is. And pivot is when you get to the moment or that fork in the road where you're like, should I rethink this? Am I doing the right thing? Should I change how I'm doing something? So the true definition of pivot is to change how you do something. And though this podcast is really a business based, heavier on business, obviously the emotional and mental states tap into a lot of our personal lives. So I am so excited for you guys to be listening to the Piv Out with me, Rocio, a new podcast. Yes, I will still continue doing things Mommy Never Told Me. But again, this podcast is more business based. We will have conversations with different people in business. You will see on my social media at the Piv Out Hub. Because there are a lot of more fun things coming through this podcast. I have been doing some public speaking engagements, and I am praying and working on potentially coming out with a course of sorts, a workshop, something that is more tangible that people can take away from as a tool of sorts to enter into that Piv Out season for you. Before we get into today's topic, which I'm really excited about, which is the first one. So you are tuning into episode 1. If you have no idea who I am, if you are not an amazing friend who is listening because you love me and want to be supportive, if you are not a previous coworker, let me give you a 411 101 into who Rocio is. So Rocio, also known as Roxy, which ironically, fun fact, fun story, kind of not fun, but I worked for Puff, Sean Combs, P. Diddy very early in my career. It was actually my first job out of college. And I remember working there, and Puff used to call me all types of names, Rocio, Rockio, things that were just not my name. My name is Rocio. But understanding and being lenient with those who can't pronounce it with the accent, it's Rocio is fine. That being said, one day he says, I'm going to call you Rox. And early in my 20s, I'm still very sassy. I'm still very opinionated. But I want to believe, refined my delivery. Not everyone will agree. And I said, no, you're not. You're not going to call me Roxy. No, you're not going to call me Rox. And I was insistent on him calling me by my name. But as time would have it, and more and more holding space in that office with him, with the Sean John Bad Boy team, and really whatever else he was working on, Rox became Roxy, and then it kind of like stuck, and it kind of landed on my lap, and I kind of like it. And now I go by Rocio, Rox, or Roxy, or a badass bitch, or whatever you want to call me. So I'll take it as long as it's delivered with love. I'm a kid from Hartford, Connecticut. I went to public school. I was born with a disability. Technically, by legal terms, it is a disability. It's never seemed to make me feel disabled in any way. But again, one of those things that we may discuss on the podcast is those moments in life where you pivot, those moments in life where you have these awakenings, those moments in life where you're like, holy fuck, you know what? Maybe being born with two fingers has made me resilient. Maybe being born with two fingers has made me different, stronger. Maybe being born like this has a huge role and plays a huge role in who I am as a fucking badass. And I say that humbly and respectfully because I also come from the school of you do not need to dim your light. You do not need to undermine or underplay your successes personally or professionally. So what we will not do on this podcast is just that. Now, I've always wanted more. I have always subscribed to more, not more money per se, even though money is amazing, but more. I have always been extremely inquisitive as a child. I have always wondered how things work. I have always wondered how the mind works. My father, again, I haven't said it on here, but you will learn as you listen to the podcast. One thing I am is very transparent. My father has paranoid schizophrenia. So though I am not an MD, I am not a doctor. This is not a show where I want you to say, well, they said, she said on the pivot. This is a show for enhancing, enlightening, and giving tools that have worked for me. I think there's 8 billion people, I think, on this planet. And there can be 70 million marketers and 20,000 electricians and 90,000 plumbers. And I think we would all approach fixing a broken toilet in a different way. First step, second step, third step. So I always believe that the uniqueness in life is within you. What we will talk about on this podcast is that those moments in life where you pivot out, moments and experiences that I had, moments and experiences that I lived through, some of the guests on my show lived through. The beauty of the podcast is that the plan is for it not to be a traditional business podcast. When I have some of my great friends on, it's not about, oh, where were you? How did you get here? What do you do now? Tell us about your success. It's really about, again, always tying into that mental and emotional space the moment you decide to pivot out. That can be from going from a dancer to an artistic director, which I'm hoping to have my sister on the podcast. So those are just some examples. Rewinding a little bit, I mentioned that I have been a brand architect for over 20 years. And if I didn't mention that, there it is. I have been building brands for about over 20 years. I started my career with Puff. I've worked with Jay. I've worked with Eminem. I've worked at Nike. I worked at Kohan. I worked with Ellen DeGeneres. And throughout that time period, I've always had clients on the side or activations or things that I always did on my own. But when I had my pivot moment was when I was working with Ellen DeGeneres. And I couldn't get pregnant. And no matter what we tried, we couldn't get pregnant. It took us 2 years. At the same time, I got very sick while I was working. I lost 20 pounds. I couldn't eat. I was getting nauseous. And of course, I went through all the medical processes to figure out what exactly was going on. I got endoscopies and colonoscopies. I saw specialists. I saw a parasite specialist. Even though I had not been to another country, I wanted to make sure that I was checking everything off the list. And then finally, I went to a doctor and he said, "You're stressed." And I said, "Me? Stressed? Never. Impossible. I can't be stressed. I'm happy. I've always been a very positive. I've always been a very happy person. But truth of the matter is I was stressed. Working there for 4.5 years, I was bringing in very lucrative deals. I was excelling at what my quote unquote job was, but the environment was not set up to excel emotionally and mentally. For the record, if and when I discuss any of my previous employers, anybody I've ever worked with, if this person happens to be a tastemaker or a celebrity or a famous person, I just want to be respectful in saying respectfully that I have never signed an NDA. I am not tied to not speaking about any of these people, but I may not speak in much detail out of respect to my coworkers at the time. And honestly, out of respect to the people, no matter how awful they were, and out of respect to myself and my season there. I believe that something comes out of every day, every week, every year, every opportunity. Sometimes we don't see them as good things, but something comes out of everything we encounter. Moving on. This podcast, I'm excited because I too have pivoted. I too tap into pivoting sometimes pretty often. I have pivoted of my marriage. I have relocated. I have pivoted relationships, friendships, and lots of business situationships. So again, I'm excited for you guys to be here. I'm excited for you guys to listen, and I'm excited for you guys to actually take tangible tools from this podcast. So what do I mean by that? I mean, I have been to lots of conferences. I have heard plenty of podcasts, amazing podcasts, which I will share throughout this first season, where I have heard interviews with people I admire, business people, smart people. And many times I feel encouraged, I feel excited, but I don't feel like I leave with tools or tangible steps to follow through with, whatever the podcast was focused on at the time. Sometimes we listen, or sometimes we attend a conference or a workshop, or even listening to a motivational speaker, and we do leave motivated. But what we don't do is leave with, how do I do this? What is next? How do I, in turn, make that pivot for myself? So on today's episode, I hope that I can steer you in the right direction. I hope that I encourage you, but above all, I hope that I let you make you feel, let you leave this podcast with tools and steps that my prayer is, once you have decided to pivot, you can move forward with. Welcome to the Pivot with Rocio. On today's episode, I'm going to be talking to you about redefining yourself and saying yes, absolutely, to new identities, especially after a major life shift. That it's like Oprah calls it that aha moment. Here on the Piv Out, we will call it the moment of Piv Out. For me, above all things, before I do anything, I try to pray, I try to meditate in prayer, and I constantly have this thing where I check in with myself. I am constantly checking in with how something makes me feel, how someone makes me feel. So for instance, a job, a client, a friend, a situation. Instead of responding, I take a moment to check in with myself and really be honest and say, how does this make me feel? How did this make me feel? I feel like we all have these moments of wonder. We all have these moments of dreaming, in these moments of, I can do that, or damn, if they can do that, I can do this, or I can do that. It shows up in different ways for everyone. I always say Uber exists. Yeah, but so does Lyft. So do taxi cabs. So do other modes of transportation. McDonald's exists. So does Burger King. So does Wendy's. So, Popeyes exists. So does KFC. There's always room for your, I want to say, idea, concept, business plan, decision, no matter how many things may exist that are very similar, because the difference in all of those is you. You are the difference. Is, as I said earlier, I've been in the brand building space for over 20 years. I have tons of friends who build brands. I have tons of friends who specialize in marketing. Now, with the way the digital space has changed and grown, social media, web, technology, a lot of the things that I used to do 20 years ago, 25 years ago, down to even buying a billboard, they just don't work the same anymore. It's not the same marketing tools. So there is room for all of us. On today's episode, redefine yourself and saying yes to new identities, especially after a major life shift. And major life shift, I'm talking about a layoff. I'm talking about being fired. I'm talking about deciding to leave a job. I'm talking about health. I'm talking about living through a death in your family, your spouse, your child, your parents. For me, I'm at the age where my mom has always been spunky and full of energy, and in the last few years, I have realized and seen with my own eyes that I need to be more patient, that I need to be more empathetic, that I need to be more understanding, because even though she would love to continue being that spunky Latina woman, I see in her the age. So for me, HIV outing and what this episode will focus on is just that. How do you redefine yourself? How do you embrace a new identity? New identity doesn't mean new person. You forget everything about who you are. You defriend everyone. You end everything. You start new. No. Redefining yourself and new identities can sometimes be very small changes, very small edits, very small things that add up. And slowly, you tap into this new season, this new person, this new you that you want to be seen as, that you want to be recognized as. If you're someone who has always worked 9 to 5 and you're an accountant, but you've always wanted to be an artist. You have an amazing ability to draw, and you've always seen yourself as an artist and really just accounting as what you do. That's what these new identities and that's what redefining yourself is really about. Redefining yourself isn't strictly in connecting with business, but simply in life. It's all a mindset and attitude. And at the end of the day, I know for me, it's a choice. Um, Not to sound like a complete asshole, but really, I tell my daughter pretty often, several times a week, and a good example is today. Today, I had a shitty morning emotionally. Um, I'm PMSing, my period is coming, and I just could not shake the feeling of, fuck, I'm just tired. I'm annoyed. I don't know why I want to cry, and what resonated with me was something that I say to Sophie in the mornings sometimes. I'm really blessed to have a very healthy child and spunky, and I look at her so many times and I'm like, fuck, I really gave birth to my twin. This is crazy. But I say to her, your energy, your attitude, how you present yourself today is a choice. You can choose to be whiny, or you can choose to be happy and joyful. We can choose to let our days be bad, or we can choose to have bad moments within good days. And yeah, all right, Rocio, whatever. Easier said than done, right? Yeah, for sure. Easier said than done. Because we all have a story to tell. We all have something going on in our lives. We all have an excuse, because really it's not a reason. It's an excuse to not be our best, to say not today, but tomorrow, to say, fuck, I'm just tired. I don't want to do it. I feel like shit. And guess what? Yeah, you know what? You should give yourself that day. You should give yourself that time. But man, after that time, you got to get back up. Because one thing I have learned in life with having a best friend and partner who's had a chronic illness for over 12 years, losing two of my closest friends to stomach cancer in the last 10 years, is that what we don't get back, and these are things that you'll notice throughout the podcast. I am huge on quotes. I am huge on words. I am huge on repeating affirmations, repeating things like the one thing you do not get back in life is time. It's time. So redefining yourself in business, redefining yourself in your personal life, it's a mindset. It's an attitude. Anything all the time is, number one, a state of mind, and number two, the desire, and then comes the ability to stay positive. In redefining yourself, let's talk prayer and mindfulness. For me, I pray a lot, and prayer and religion and talking about God is always a area that people get kind of uncomfortable with. It's like, well, I'm Jewish, well, I'm atheist, well, I'm Buddhist. It's whatever your higher being is, whatever that meditative state. I take Bikram yoga, and at the end of class, I put my hands together and I say, thank you, Jesus, for the ability to move my body. Thank you, Jesus, for allowing me to get through this class. Thank you, Jesus, for the financial means to take this class. That's me. The person next to me can be praying to Allah. The person on the other side can be just like, thank you to myself. Thank you to the universe. Thank you to the moon for rising and providing me this energy. But those reflections, those moments of tapping into your meditative state are key to your journey in redefining yourself. Praying, meditating, going on walks, working out, hiking. I know journaling is something that you've probably heard over and over and over. And I will say this, I am not that person who is consistent on journaling, especially now as a single mom. It comes down to not having time, which, by the way, is bullshit, because we make time for things that matter. But what I have come to realize is that journaling is just not my thing. It's not something that I say, damn, I want to journal today and I'm going to get all these thoughts out. I'm just going to spew it out. Like, I start journaling and 3 minutes later, my finger hurts. That little knot that was created in high school when we went to school, because kids nowadays are just typing away. But I do know people, shout out to Nancy Ruffin, who is one of my dear friends who I will address in on this podcast who journals every day, every morning. So that's her thing. Finding your thing that works for you is what matters. It's important, but you have to tap into those moments of prayer and mindfulness. For me, it's having a wellness routine. It's working out. I treat my workouts as part of my schedule. Uh, I treat them like a meeting. I treat my physical movement time like an appointment with a client. Uh, I also have time where I check in with my friends. As I mentioned, Nancy Ruffin, shout out to Nancy, is one of my friends. Ileana Acosta, one of my other friends, who these are sister friends of mine, but they're also women who are professionals and experts in their space that I can go to when I'm feeling, brain fart, when I'm feeling like I don't know what I'm doing, when I'm feeling insecure about my pivot moment, when I'm feeling like, damn, should I be doing this? So having that, for me is important. Then, of course, I have my best friend who knows me in and out. My vault, my non-judgmental, but gonna give it to you raw. Shirley, who, we do share things that have to do with business, but she plays the most important role where it's the emotional stability, reminding me that I'm human, reminding each other that we are human. So prayer and mindfulness, for me, step one in redefining myself and in, reinventing myself. Prayer and mindfulness is key. Prayer and mindfulness, however you define it, is something that is extremely important. Then as I, excuse me, as I reflect on myself, I always go into, so if you are taking notes, which guess what? I think that would be amazing. I would love that. I would love for this podcast to serve as a moment where some of you can say, you know what? Step one, step two, step three. But as I was preparing for this first episode, very different from the other podcast that I host, which, we have banter back and forth. It's very freestyle. This is something that, again, I wanted to have well thought out. I didn't want to create a podcast about tools and business and just kind of hit you with my experiences and then you figure it out. No, number one, prayer, mindfulness. Number two, reflecting on yourself. Ask yourself, what are the core values and beliefs that define me? What matters to me? What are your non-negotiables in life, in work? Better yet, do you even have any? Can you afford to do this? If I wanted to get a side hustle, if I wanted to quit my job, if I wanted to pivot out, can I afford to do this? You can. If you can't financially, you can afford to do it with your time. When we have passions, when we have a desire, one thing Phil always told me early on in our relationship, I'll never forget, and I will speak of Phil probably often, as the father of my daughter, one of my biggest supporters, and still a very best friend. Phil has had an extremely successful career in the music business, in the artist management space, in the TV world. And when we first started dating, I'll never forget, Phil said, Rocio, a man will make time for anything that he wants and wants to do. And he was saying this because he would be in the studio till 2:33 in the morning and he would still find time to come to my little apartment just to give me a kiss, just to lay with me for a few hours before going to his place and resting to then go back to the grind and do it all over again. And Phil probably doesn't even know to this day how impactful those words were to me, not only, as a professional, but now as someone who has started dating. It's something that replays in my head very often. A man, a person, we as people, we make time for things that we want. So please never forget that when it comes to you, your dreams, and what you want to do. Make the time. Okay, you may not have the money, you may not have the means in that sense, but you can make the time to put together a business plan. to put together a sense of what you're thinking, to put together, a voice note of this idea that has continued coming back, coming back, coming back. One thing I do is I often listen to podcasts or watch YouTube videos or follow now, thanks to social media, people that I admire, people that do business successfully, people that I not only enjoy the businesses that they've built, but how they present themselves to the world as good people. Because for me, my reflection on self, my core values, my beliefs are to be good, to have good energy. And, my non-negotiables as they pertain to business are flexibility. I have to continue to have flexibility, which is why I'm so thankful and blessed that I'm able to record this podcast, that I'm able to have clients, that I run my own business. Because especially now that I have my daughter, flexibility is key. It is extremely important to me. Secondly, growth intellectually is non-negotiable. What does that mean? I do not want to be in a space or with a client, even when I am approached by people, who are looking to build their brands from A to Z. If it's something that I feel is too remedial in the sense of is not going to get me excited, is not going to be something that I want to commit time to, is not something that is making me grow intellectually, at times I will decline. I will absolutely send them to someone I know who can be very helpful. But as far as for me, if I'm being true to my non-negotiables and my ability to reflect on self, I need to stay true to that. And then, of course, another taboo word, it's so crazy to me how Jesus and God and religion, as it pertains to business, is so taboo. Yet, in this presidential election, if they just throw around the word God and Christianity and Catholicism one more time, and even in this country, in God we trust is on the money. It's like, why is it so uncomfortable to talk about God? And of course, my third non-negotiable, flexibility, intellectual growth, and money. Why you got to pay me? Yesterday's price is not today's price. So those are my non-negotiables. Those are things that I reflect on myself. Those are some of the, it's hard because core values when it comes to business is not core values as they come to, in my opinion, your personal life. So that's something that you guys should think about. How did my past experiences shape my identity? I was fired. Early on in my career, I was fired. I was with Puff for 4.5 years. I got poached and poached and poached. I'll never forget this one company. They would not leave me alone. They had come to me and come to me and come to me. And at the time, I didn't necessarily want to transition, but I was working for Puff and I felt that financially I wasn't being taken care of. I mean, not TMI, not TMI. I literally was running an entire marketing department and making shit for money. They came and tripled, almost quadrupled my salary, thinking, they just assumed that Puff was paying everybody a lot of money. I took this job. I was there 5 months, maybe 6. It was the worst job I've ever had, to the point where I don't even put it on my resume. Me and the woman who initially hired me brought me on. And a month into work, it was like everything that she loved about me, that she was trying to get when she was trying to get me. My relationships, my experience was everything that ended up intimidating her, or she simply didn't like about me. 6 months later, I was let go with an excuse of elimination of position, which was not true. But essentially, if we want to call a spade, I was fired. I've lived through about 3 to 4 acquisitions. Acquisitions meaning companies come and get bought out. Cole Haan and Nike being one of them. Nike sold the Cole Haan division and all the senior leadership got let go. I dealt with a lot of microaggressions, a lot of racism at work. in the corporate space. And as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, I literally got myself physically sick from the stress and the inability to once again tap into my non-negotiables. What is it that I will not allow? What is it that are my absolute breaking points? So that is something that as you are in your pivot moment, you really want to think about, what is it for me that is my non-negotiable? And now we get into the fun part. What are your passions and interests? Really start asking yourself, do I love this? Do I love what I'm doing? Am I good at this? And that's it? Or am I good at this and do I love it? And if I don't love it, how can I fill my love cup while I work here, while I build, while I make some money? You know, what are the things that fuel me about what I do? Again, this podcast is not about you quitting your job, going into entrepreneurship, because I'll tell you, this shit is fucking hard. Being an entrepreneur basically means you eat what you kill. And if you don't kill nothing, you ain't eating. And not eating is not fun. So I will say, as I said to my fellow entrepreneur, Kaylani Vasquez from Boss Babes and Brunch, this entrepreneurship is not for the weak. But as I mentioned, see how all things circle back. Flexibility is key for me. Intellectual growth is key for me. Pay is key for me. I have, thank God, built a consulting business where I am fulfilling those three things. I am being able to go back and tap into and make sure, bam, these things are getting fulfilled. Something you want to ask yourself is, what are your passions and interests? You know, do you love being an accountant? Do you love being a principal? You know, these are all things that are very respectful careers. I'm not telling you to shift, but is it fulfilling you? Is it fulfilling your love cup? You know, for me, the experience that led me to switch to, and I'm not loving this term new identity, because I don't want it to be misinterpreted like you are becoming someone else. But when I was at Ellen and I got so sick, and the minute I stepped on, I resigned from that job. And the minute I stepped on the elevator and was no longer nauseous, was no longer not able to eat, was no longer experiencing diarrhea, that was the moment for me. That was the experience that led me to seek this new identity, this new redefinition of myself, this new whole, what are my non-negotiables? With that comes fear. You know, number 3, let's talk about goals and let's talk about fear. What are your end goals? Removing fear is key to that. What new goals do you want to achieve? Is it legacy? Is it money? Is it stability? For me, it's legacy. I want to leave a legacy for my daughter. Me and Phil talk about this all the time. I don't want her to start at zero. I don't want her to start where even though I'm thankful to my mother, my dad, my parents, I'm thankful to everything they sacrificed and everything they did. I do not want to have Sophie start at nothing. My goal is to leave her something. My goal is to leave just a good foundation where if she wants to dream a little bit, she can. So the end goal in removing fear and all those things are important and matter. And my goal and what do I want to achieve? Legacy, money, stability. I ask you, what are your goals? And what are the fears that are holding you back? Before we get to fears, how do these goals align with your core values? That goes back to what I said. I don't want to leave Sophie with nothing. I want Sophie to be able to tap into an opportunity that provides her flexibility, that provides her good pay, and that provides her intellectual growth. If she chooses for that to be what's important to her, great. If not, I want her to be in a space where she has the foundation where she can have the ability to say, what are my non-negotiables? So you see how this is working, right? You see how all of these things kind of work in a cycle. It's not step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. It's all these steps. And as you filter through, they kind of work hand in hand. Money is like this evil word, as I said earlier. And it's like egotistical to say money is the goal. I remember we met with Ellen, and again, it could be seen as greedy. It could be seen as egotistical, but her goal was to be a billionaire when she started this brand. And for clarity, this has nothing to do with the television show. I worked for Ellen on her brand at Ellen DeGeneres, separate from the TV show. And some people would be like, damn, does she need more money? Like, is it really about the money? But there is absolutely nothing wrong with financial stability being your goal, financial security, financial freedom being your goal. But with that comes small steps. What is holding you back the most? What are you most afraid of? Is it that financial instability, or is financial stability more worth it? Is it bigger for you to be financially stable? Are you like, I've never done this before. I don't have the support. What if I fail? And as a Latina, I will say this, what will other people say? What will other people think? This is a big one. If you think about it, a lot of times we stop ourselves from doing things because of this thought of, what will other people say? Will they think I'm crazy? What will other people think? I left my job to start my baking business. I'm up until 2 a.m. and I have my job because I love the way baking cookies makes me feel. Fuck that. Fuck what other people think. Fuck what other people are saying. This whole this whole episode specifically is about redefining yourself. This is about finding new identities for you. I always have the thought of like, if you subscribe to this world of like, what will other people say? Let's say, right? What will other people say? But let me give you a moment to think and reflect. What will other people say if, when you close the door to your house, to your apartment, whether you're a single man or woman, whether you just have your husband with no kids, whether you have your kids, any of those things, do those other people sit at that dining table with you? Do those other people buy your groceries? Are these other people that somehow you are so concerned with what they think? Are those other people paying for your mortgage, your rent, your lifestyle? Let's change that mindset. It's financial ruin or not having the money scaring you. Start a budget. Is it your insecurity? Let's change that narrative. Is it your past that's traumatizing you? Let's get that therapy going. And bigger picture is, let's celebrate the small wins. So we've talked prayer, mindfulness. We've talked reflecting on yourself. And we've talked goals and fears. Now let's talk about this word that is super popular, that everyone thanks to social media has been using, and it's triggers. Identifying your triggers. What specific events or feelings prompted this desire for you to change? As I mentioned earlier, and I'll keep this brief because I did talk about this a little earlier without getting into the body of the podcast. But for me, it was getting sick. For me, it was getting sick and fighting this ego of like, fuck, but I'm working for Ellen DeGeneres. What happens if I quit? Who am I if I quit? Who am I if I'm not tied to this person? I want you guys to understand that my entire career has been, thank you, Jesus. I've been very successful in being a part of some amazingly dope teams that have built brands that are recognizable globally, regardless of how, unfortunately, let's say Puff's situation right now is going down and, Ellen had to leave the show. She decided to end a few seasons early based on some backlash. Granted, those are all things that have happened and ended pretty nasty. But these are brands. These are brand identities that have been global brands for years and years and years. So I was in a space where I said, who am I if I'm not attached to Ellen? Who am I if I'm not attached to Puff? Who am I if I'm not attached to a brand like Nike? So I had to kind of do that work. And that was my trigger for me, in a twofold. My trigger was, who am I if I'm not attached? And then as I was seeing myself get sick, my trigger was, am I ever going to become a mother? Am I ever going to be healthy? Am I ever going to be able to do what I am good at doing and enjoy and not have to be surrounded by toxicity? So I identified that. And I said, I'm done. I'm done with making other people rich. I'm done with making rich people richer. And these are patterns in life that consistently lead to a reevaluation. It's like, oh, what are these feelings that I'm having? It goes back, boom, checking in with yourself. For me, it's professionally, and I will stick to the business side. This doesn't feel good. Literally, figuratively, emotionally, mentally, I did not feel good. That's where boundaries step in. That's where, who's going to take care of me if I don't take care of myself? What good am I to continue building a business, to continue building a brand, to continue bringing in millions of dollars if inside I am dying? And I say that softly. Thank God I didn't have a cancer. I didn't have anything that was literally killing me. But please do not underestimate the power that stress or even unidentified stress can have on your body. So that for me was my trigger. What are your triggers? Take a moment, if I can challenge you, to say, how do I identify my triggers? What are these triggers? What is it that is making me even think or making me even tune into this podcast about pivoting? What is it? Number 5. All right, Rocio, now I'm into it. I've identified things. I'm checking in with myself. How do I develop new skills and create new habits? Habits are key. There is a book called Atomic Habits. I don't know the author off the top of my head. It is a phenomenal read. If I was you, I would get the Cliff Notes, read the book. It's pretty easy read. And a lot of times these books, I know for me personally, or these workshops or things, I do learn things. Trust me. I will never, I know what I know what I don't, and a bitch don't know everything. But a lot of times what it is are reminders. They're reminders of things that we've already read, heard, seen, lived. But Atomic Habits is one of those books where you're like, yeah, man. Creating new habits. What are the skills that you need to support this transformation? What is that? Do you want to follow people you admire, people you look up to? For me, Sarah Blakely, my goal is to have Sarah Blakely on this podcast. My goal is to have Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. My goal is to have Jessica Alba. These are things I'm speaking into existence. These are not women that I have relationships with. These are not women that I even know. But these are people that, one, I admire how they do business. I admire how they carry themselves. I admire how they have pivoted in their lives. You're going to do it your way, 100%. But there is something about dissecting, looking, taking note, omitting things that people you look up to, and I say that in quotes, are doing. Many times what happens is we freeze, we get trapped, and we're like, fuck, I can't ever be like Sarah Blakely. I can't ever be like, and if you don't know who Sarah Blakely is, she created Spanx. Before Skims, before Kim Kardashian, way before this generation. She is the originator of sucking it all in. And she started in her apartment. Very, very much like a lot of the piv outers that I will feature on Instagram. But I will speak that into existence. These are the types of people that I want to have on the podcast. Again, not to talk about, oh, I built my business, I started from the ground up. Like, this is all information you can get in an article. I want to dive deep in. I want to know the mental and emotional state of the moment of the piv out. What was it when you failed? Where were you emotionally and mentally when you succeeded? Because to me, those are moments that really create the backbone to your success personally and professionally. So let's say for me, right? Developing a new skill, creating a new habit. As I piv out, I haven't shared with many. It's a lot of the things I do are private, not for any reason besides the fact that I don't share, but I will share that I started an acting class 6 weeks ago. I signed myself up for an improv class, one, because I always want to work at perfecting my craft, which is, and hopefully will continue to be in the future, a lot more public speaking. So I signed up for an improv class. And to me, that's developing a new skill, that is tuning up, that is perfecting a skill, putting me in a space and an environment that is new, and allowing me to, get uncomfortable with, this freestyle, this whole improvisation style that in turn, a lot of successful business people have done to become better public speakers. So how can you integrate new habits into your daily life? How? But, think about that. Think about what can you do. And I keep going back to this baker. Maybe I'm hungry or have a sweet tooth, but it's like, what can you do? What class can you take? I just told Sophie is signed up, I'm definitely an experiential mom. She takes ballet, she takes hip hop, she takes tennis, she takes a performing class. And, she the other day was like, Mommy, I don't want to go to ballet. I already know ballet. I'm a ballerina. Then I said, Sophie, the most successful ballerinas still take class. The most successful basketball players still have a coach. So you're never too good. You're never too great to continue putting in the work to be better, to be the best. And in addition to that, the new habits part, man, we could dive so deep into that. But for me, a habit that works well for me, especially as an entrepreneur, and this is just one example, is, the accountability to myself. I remember when I first started consulting, it's easy to feel like, oh, I don't have a boss. I don't have to check in with anybody. And that's beautiful. But fuck, you got to check in with yourself. You are your boss. Why is it so easy to perform, excel, and be accountable to a boss in a corporate space or at a job? But when it comes to ourselves, we don't hold the same standard. So for me, being accountable to myself was really important, and it's something that really matters. 6, let's get into it. Who's in your circle? Who's in your crew? This goes without saying. How do you categorize your people? I mentioned Nancy, Liana, Shirley earlier, so I'm not going to talk about this too deeply. But who you surround yourself matters. Who are the friends you travel with? Who are the friends you go to dinner with? Who are the friends you can go dancing with? And then who are the friends that you can go to and say, I want to pursue this. I want to change this. I want to leave my relationship. I want to leave my job. I want to start a side hustle. Who are the friends that are going to come and support you? Who are the friends that are going to provide you with feedback? Who are the friends that are going to pour into you. This is extremely important. Not only who are the friends, who are your crews, who are the mentors, but what are you ingesting? What are you listening to? What are you watching? What are you allowing into your mind? And are you scrolling social media? And now I'll get into a personal example. You're single, right? And it happens to me now as a single person, scrolling social media, and on social media, these algorithms, they start to kind of fucking identify and know who you are. It's the craziest shit ever. And you see these couples, oh my God, they're so sweet. They're so great. And you're like, fuck, man. I want a man who gets me flowers. I want a man who's detailed. I want a man who thinks about me. I want a man who's planning trips. I want a man who I don't got to tell him things to do 150,000 times. But what have I in turn done to myself? Has that been positive? It could be if I allow it to pour into me in a way where I say, I deserve, I will meet, I am open to. But what you want to make sure you don't do is the opposite. And again, this is a romantic personal example, but it just came to my mind. It's like where you say, I'm never going to meet. Men aren't like that. All men are the same. You creating these new habits, understanding who's in your crew, what are you ingesting, circle. Again, you see how all these things tie together. All these things tie together. All these things are tools, tricks, and to-dos almost. If you want to do the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10s of this podcast, or come up with your own markers as to how do I redefine myself? How do I develop this new identity? How do I embrace this? These are tools and tips that, again, this is not revolutionary, but these are reminders to yourself. Who you are with, what you ingest, how you speak to yourself matters. Number 7, change is good. It's inevitable. So embrace it. Focus on the opportunity, knowing that uncertainty is natural. Rather than dwelling on the challenges and the risks, have we ever thought of, looking at the challenge and the risk as an opportunity? Think about that. Of course, you got to filter through the what ifs and the risks. And, what if I don't have enough? What if I fail? What if, it doesn't end up being what I love? It doesn't end up being what I'm good at, and nobody else likes it. Obviously, you have to do the man work. You have to do the focus groups. You have to do make sure you're asking people. There was a podcast I listened to, Diary of a CEO, shout out to Steven, who has this just a dope podcast. And there was a man on there, and he gave an example about wanting to open an ice cream shop that made ice creams out of kale and ice creams out of like mashed potatoes, for instance. And it's something that's so like duh, but you need to see, why doesn't an ice cream shop exist that serves mashed potato flavored ice cream or kale flavored ice cream? Is it something you like, or is it something that the masses could like? And that's where focus groups come in. Change is good. Who knows? You can do a focus group, 10 out of 10, loving kale. Move on with your business model. Again, I'm giving a broad example, but maybe editing a little bit, maybe making the flavor kale, strawberry, banana, et cetera, et cetera. You get what I'm saying? When you do face the setbacks, don't think of them as failures. Don't just accept them, but reframe them as something valuable. Growth sometimes can be seen as a threat. It can be seen as, fuck, do I want to grow? Or is it growing too fast? Or like, do I deserve this? Do I want to do this? Approach it as an opportunity to learn and develop possible new skills, resilience, knowledge, learning something new. Again, going back to shifting that mindset. Shift that mindset. Just because McDonald's and Burger King exist don't mean you can't come out with a Fat Burger. You can't come out with Five Guys. And now I'm referring to business. Um, Developing these changes, right, means taking time to do the intentional work. Developing means leaving a room to develop mental agility and adaptability. Leaving room to develop mental agility and adaptability. You know what that means? In turn, you'll become stronger in your skills and your abilities. Final note here, which to me is the most fun and the most important one, is celebrating your milestones. There is also the need. You have to be able to track your progress. So you may ask yourself, how do I know I'm making progress? And this wasn't even one of the categories that I had up here, but I as I'm freestyling, it's like, how do I know I'm making progress? Have you ever thought of the fact that you have an issue setting boundaries, right? I have an issue setting boundaries. I don't know how to set boundaries. I don't know how to say no. You set the mindset to simply start saying no to things that don't feed you, saying no to things that don't suit you, saying no to things that don't feel good. A simple way to check in on your progress is, can you say no without explanation? And if you're like, damn, yeah, I've actually said no a few times. I feel good about it. And again, it's not no being bitchy. It's not no because I just don't, I just want to be an asshole. It's no because A, I don't want to. No, because I don't have the time. No, because I'm not going to reset my entire day to fill someone else. That's just an example of my need. Let's say in redefining myself, I wanted to set more boundaries. And if I want to track my progress, have I in turn developed the ability to say no without explanation? Another progress point. Do you allow yourself to indulge in things which are not good for you? Or have you decided and made the choice to say, no, I'm not going to indulge in things that aren't good for me? Do you feel like you have clarity over your priorities? Back to, have we set clear boundaries? A big one for me is I have no problem sacrificing personal time, when it comes to working on something I'm dreaming about, working on something that excites me. That's when I know I've made progress. Biggest one for me is not really caring what anyone says. I do not care what people say, what people think. Even this podcast, I was dreaming about it. I thought about it. And my goal for this podcast is to get more public speaking opportunities. That's where I want to grow. That's where I want to excel. And it has been proven time and time again that great public speakers have really dope podcasts. So again, thank you for listening and thank you for tuning in, whether it's 1, 2, 10, 12, 200, 2,000, 50,000 listeners. But for me, this is something I enjoy. This is something I feel like I am good at. And finding a topic like the emotional and mental states of a pivout out is what's bringing it all together. So let's go back to celebrating milestones. And this is the last point. So we have discussed and this episode is going to be called New You. Who dat? Love it. Redefining yourself and saying yes to new identities. Let's talk prayer and mindfulness, reflecting on self. Number 2. Number 3, let's talk goals and fears. 4, identifying triggers. 5, how to develop new skills and create new habits. 6, who is in your crew. 7, knowing that change is good, it's inevitable, so embrace it. 8, I didn't even think about adding this one in there, but let's add it in there, making progress. And 9, celebrating milestones matters, even the small wins. If I can end this podcast saying anything today and this episode, show yourself some grace, while being honest with yourself. It's like the ice cream example I gave earlier. Show yourself some grace. So show yourself some pats on the back for an amazing idea that you came up with, a change that you want to make, personal or business. And but also be honest with yourself. Is a kale ice cream shop really the way to go? Or is there a way that you can jigger that up, make it a booming cafe that sells kale ice cream and juices? I don't know. I'm just speaking off the top of my head. Let's make some realistic goals. Stages in life and business. Realistic goals meaning don't be so heavy. You cannot, in my opinion, let's say have a goal to come out with a consumer product, meaning something tangible like a pen. Let's say you want to come out with the world's revolutionary pen and it's going to be able to write in the sky, Harry Potter style, like a wand, but it's a pen. And then you're going to pitch it and sell it and get it to market within 2 months. That's crazy. That's crazy. So let's set some realistic goals. Let's talk about the stages in life and in business that are more realistic. In business, talk about phasing your businesses. Talk about phasing your dreams, within 6 months, within a year, within 18 months, within 24 months. Where do I want to be with this product, with this lip gloss, with this phone case, with this new invention that I have? Be realistic, but put in the work. You also can't set a 6-month, year timeline and you're like, okay, within a year, I'm going to have samples, for instance, but yet you never get in touch with the factory. You have to put in the work. But once you get in touch with the factory, once you get your first sample, second sample, third sample, let's celebrate those victories. Let's celebrate along the way. Let's get excited about what we're developing. Let's leave room for editing. Let's leave room for focus groups. Let's leave room for, oh shit, maybe I can make this a little better. So celebration of milestones, celebrating the small wins, showing yourself grace, being honest with yourself, setting realistic goals, celebrating small victories along the way. But it is to me extremely important to acknowledge your achievements, both big and small, simply because, in my opinion, due to lots of professional experiences that I've had with some of the world's biggest tastemakers, and I tell you again, not to mention names or not for any other reason, but because simply I am thankful for having had and continuing to have experiences around people that society define as affluent, celebrities, tastemakers, wealthy, because all that has done is taught me that we are all the same, that we all have the ability to dream. We all have the ability to grow, and we all are taking part in this thing called life. And to me, life is made of a zillion small moments that create the bigger definition of life. Stop waiting for this big crescendo moment. Stop waiting for God to come down on a cloud and say, this is your moment. I bless you, my child. What you're going to do is get fatigued. What you're going to do is get idea fatigue. And what you're going to do is end up doing nothing. So if I can encourage you today with these simple steps on how to redefine yourself and say yes to your new identities, especially after major life shifts, I will say and end with that. Do it. Do not be afraid Do not second guess. Do not wait for the opportunity to come to your door. You are equipped. You can do this. And with hard work, prayer, patience, steps, checking in, setting goals, being honest, etc., 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 especially the celebrations, because you know I love a party, you can do this. Thank you for tuning in to my first episode. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned something. I hope you walk away, above all things, feeling encouraged, feeling loved, feeling poured into, and feeling like you can do anything. I love you. Thank you and gracias for listening to Piv Out with Rocio, the podcast. I am so thankful you're here. I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed yourself. I hope you laughed. I don't hope you cried, but if you did, I'm here for you still. I'm so excited to connect with you again. Make sure you share, tell a friend to tell a friend, and I'll see you soon.